I am not what I once was. 400 years ago, the ones he knew, the places he walked, the names he carried like songs in his chest, stood still, as if trapped in amber, as if time itself had forgotten how to breathe. The world was not dead then, but it was silenced. A stasis crept over the land like frost over warm stone. Not sleep, not death, suspension. And in that silence, they came. Mortal hands, divine curiosities, cursed architects of invention. They peeled open the seams of the world with steel and prayer, searching for truth or power, or both. In their hunger, they stirred things left buried in the marrow of mountains. They fed on my ether, and so I changed. Oceans rose where deserts once wept. Continents shifted like restless beasts in slumber. Nations untethered from the ground now float among the clouds, suspended by wild etheric winds and tethered by chains of will. What remains of the old world are broken bones, and over them demons dance, vampires dine, and ghouls laugh in the hollow voices of forgotten kings. The heavens themselves bleed color unknown to the living. Stars flicker in languages only the dead can read. Time moves sideways in certain valleys. There are cities with no streets, only teeth, and yet he awakens. Lucian, last of the rift born, he who once carved silence with a blade, who vanished before the first sundering, now breathes again. I feel him, like a pulse returning to a dying limb, like thunder building beneath the roots. But what will he see when his gaze finally lifts? Will he mourn the world he once protected? Will he rage against what it has become? Or will he become something else entirely? For though the stars have shifted and the soil forgets names, I remember him. And he will remember me. The jungle was ancient, but not in the way that trees grow old and lean into the soil. No. This place remembered things. Its roots curled like fingers over stone ruins half swallowed by moss, relics of civilizations long faded beneath the ether's surge. Trees hung heavy with vines that shimmered faintly in the fading light, whispering to each other in winds that did not blow. Even the birdsong was warped, slowed, reversed, looped. A hummingbird flitted past Lucian's ear, then seemed to pause mid-air, wings suspended mid-beat before skipping forward like a scratched record. He stepped carefully. The earth here was soft, spongy from overgrowth, and riddled with hidden traps, ether scars left behind by magical detonations or time fractures. And still, something watched. "You walk like the world belongs to you," came a voice not far ahead. Lucian froze. The voice was calm, commanding, feminine. It felt older than the jungle. From behind a curtain of translucent vines, a woman stepped forward, barefoot, wrapped in gold-threaded fabrics that shimmered like the stars caught fire. Her skin was deep bronze, eyes aglow with a quiet, unsettling clarity. Her hair was bound in silver rings, each etched with glyphs of a language Lucian didn't remember learning, but understood all the same. She looked at him as if she'd seen his birth and his death, and had already made peace with both. "Do you remember this place?" she asked, studying him with amusement and sorrow tangled in her smile. Lucian narrowed his eyes. "I remember silence. I remember bones. I remember falling asleep to the sound of a world dying." "Good!" She turned and began walking, not looking back. "Then you're ready." And time bent. Not violently. Not like some spell or blast. More like... The jungle sighed. The air shimmered. The light shifted. A bird that had been perched on a branch suddenly flew in reverse, its cry echoing before it left its beak. Lucian moved after her, finding that his legs carried him effortlessly now, as if the underbrush parted before her will. He did not ask her name. The world whispered it to him: Sakai, Queen of the Sky, bound nation, Keeper of Kronos, a sovereign without a court, a ruler who walked alone through green shadows. Hours or moments later, the trees began to thin, the canopy cracked open, revealing a brilliant dusk washed in twin moonlight, one moon amber, one blue. Down the slope of the jungle's edge, a city glimmered like scattered glass, a market city built on the border of wilderness and civilization. It had no name on any map. Carved directly into the cliffside, it sprawled across the edge of the jungle with narrow staircases, floating platforms, and merchant stalls suspended on cables. Sidewalks of bone glass led to dirt roads packed by foot traffic. Smoke rose from 100 different fires, spices, meats, and machines coalescing into a fragrant storm. Music drifted up, half organic, half metal. People here wore masks. Not out of tradition, but survival. This city was a neutral zone shared by humans, ghouls, and lesser demons. Lucian felt his hand move toward the hilt of Duskfang on instinct. Not yet, Sekai said beside him. Here, even death needs a permit. And with that, they descended. They descended into a pulse. The city wasn't alive, it was surviving, which was different. Every corner thrummed with the kind of hunger only peace could breed. A hunger sharpened by masks, muffled deals, and smoke-thick air. Children of all species darted through alleyways like phantoms, laughter clashing against the distant clang of hammers and machinery. A demon with a single horn bargained loudly with a glass-eyed merchant over a cage full of whispering stones. Lucian followed Sakai down a spiral of woven rope bridges, his eyes flicking to every shadow. His boots hit the bone glass with a dull knock, and it resonated faintly underfoot, like walking on ancient promises. Sakai moved like she belonged here, not as a guest, as gravity. This place wasn't here before, Lucian muttered. It was, she said, scanning the crowd with practiced calm. You just didn't survive long enough to see it, a merchant called to them in a tongue that licked the air like a flame. Sakai waved them off with a flick of her wrist, but Lucian paused. The stall was lined with weapons, not forged, but grown. Blades with breathing edges, guns that hummed lullabies when touched. One spear had a vertebrae for a shaft. They remember you, the merchant crooned behind his mask, an angular thing made of mirrored bone. Or maybe it's just your shadow. Lucian raised an eyebrow and moved on. They passed a booth where syrups of colorless taste were sold in floating bubbles, drifting just high enough to require a jump. A little girl, fangs poking out of her smile, leapt to catch one. It burst on her tongue. Her eyes rolled back in joy. Elsewhere, a trio of masked dancers moved in a slow spiral around a central brazier, flames licking higher as they stepped in rhythm. Their feet left prints that glowed for seconds before fading, a memory of heat more than light. What is this city called? Lucian asked finally. Sekai didn't answer at first. She was watching a beggar, or what passed for one here. An old ghoul with no tongue and 8 fingers on each hand, sketching circles into the dirt with his nails. No one paid him any mind. Then she spoke. Depends on who you ask. The demons call it Still's Pill. The humans say Ashgate. Ghouls prefer Market of the Unnamed. I like to call it a scar, Lucian frowned. Why a scar? Because everything here is healing wrong, but healing all the same. They came to a wide terrace carved into the cliffside, overlooking the jungle canopy. The twin moons hung just above the horizon now, reflecting in a slow-moving river far below like watching eyes. Lucian leaned against the railing. A silence settled between them, but not an empty one. A silence that hummed with shared memory and unspoken questions. He finally asked, Why did you bring me here? Sakai tilted her head. Because memory is buried beneath noise. You need to remember who you were before you decide who you'll become. Lucian glanced at the crowd again. Masked, laughing, bartering for power disguised as trinkets. I don't know if I like who I was, he said. You don't need to, she replied. You just need to face him. He thought about that. A bell tolled in the distance. Soft, not metallic, more like the crack of glass under pressure. The crowd shifted subtly. Attention folded into the fabric of the air. Sakai stood straighter. They're closing the north gate. Lucian turned toward her. Should I be worried? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes followed something above the rooftops. Something unseen. No, she finally said. But they should be. Lucian didn't ask who they were. His fingers rested on Duskfang's grip, and the weapon answered with a pulse, like a sleeping god stirring in its sheath. Lucian's grip tightened around Duskfang's handle. A reflex born of lifetimes. But the weapon didn't stir. No heat. No hum. No pulse of warning. It was uninterested. That, more than anything, unsettled him. They're not closing the gate because of danger, Lucian said, watching the market's subtle shift. Merchants drawing their curtains, guards moving in urgent unison. Sakai nodded once, her eyes already turned toward the eastern horizon. "They're making room," she said. "Only one gate opens when this sort of arrival happens. All others close. Not to lock people in, but to keep them out." Lucian followed her gaze. From the vantage point, the east edge of the city was visible, a massive platform connected to a series of skeletal lifts and wind-stitched bridges suspended over the jungle cliffs. The east gate, larger, older, and marked with spiraling glyphs that shimmered even in shadow. Right now, its sigils were glowing gold. The wind shifted. Not strong, but sharp. It carried the scent of hot metal, wet parchment, and something older, like oil slicked over bone. Sakai closed her eyes and exhaled through her nose. "He's early." Lucian didn't ask who. He watched as the crowd below began moving with purpose. Some retreated. Some knelt. Others removed their masks, not in reverence, but in strategy. Eyes needed to see. Mouths needed to speak carefully. The city itself seemed to pull taut like a drawn bow. A merchant slammed their stall shut. A child was yanked into a house. Even the beggar ghoul stopped carving circles in the dirt. He simply sat back and waited. Lucian turned to Sakai, his tone low. "That's for on one's name, the ranger's trying to show flashgod." Sakai opened her eyes and looked at him, her expression unreadable, because even Duskfang knows not every arrival is a threat. Lucian arched a brow. "You saying this is a friend?" "No," she said, her voice softer now. "I'm saying this is inevitable." And as the final bell rang, a sound that echoed not in air, but within the bones, the east gate opened, not like a door, but like a mouth. The glyphs unfurled, each line of script stretching and weaving apart, reshaping reality with quiet majesty. The light bent around it, the sky dimmed, and a single figure began to walk through the gate's threshold. From this distance, Lucian could only make out the shape, but it moved wrong. Not in a grotesque way, but too perfectly, like a thought walking in flesh. Like it didn't need to step, only to intend. Sakai's voice cut the silence like a soft blade. "You might want to remember everything before he reaches you." Lucian's hand twitched on Duskfang's grip again. This time, the weapon pulsed. Not with fear, with curiosity.